Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
8:07 on O'Connor and Company. Coming up in 30 minutes, we're going to reflect a little bit more on the legacy of Ozzy Osbourne with David Wild. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
During the Biden administration, when we first started hearing the reports that tens of thousands of young children had just sort of disappeared from the radar of the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Health and Human Services, we were stunned, shocked, outraged, and frankly, at times I felt despair over this, that these children had so-called gotten lost in the system, as they like to say. These are children who came here unaccompanied across our border, oftentimes exploited by human traffickers, drug dealers, drug cartels, and then our government willingly handed them over to people without ever having any proof that they were aunts or uncles or sponsors or in any way had some sort of responsibility for those children, and then failed to do any serious follow-up to make sure that the kids were okay. And frankly, that's just scratching the surface of how horrible this story is. We're learning more, and to shed some more light on this, and maybe some people on Capitol Hill who listen to this show or in the administration who listen to this show might hear this and actually prioritize this issue more than they have. Let's bring in Allie Hopper. She is a recognized counter-trafficking expert, and she founded Guard Against Trafficking. She testified about this issue earlier this week, and she joins us now. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Hopper, and thank you for the work you do.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry and Julie, for having me.
Let's start with the big revelation this week about these unanswered phone calls. So the Biden administration, through what HHS or DHS, they set up a hotline. So if these children felt like they were in danger or had any issues, they could call that number, right? And then what happened?
Correct. So the hotline was set up so that anyone in the community, whether it was the child themselves or a community member, could report, concerns over this child. And what we found out through multiple interviews, conversations with whistleblowers, and through our own investigation was that 65,000 calls went unanswered. Now, that's not total calls received, but 65,000 calls going unanswered is absolutely unacceptable. And then we found out that there was only one person assigned to that hotline.
One person for how many children are we talking about here?
For the entire hotline.
Do we know how many kids are in question here in terms of being handed over to suspect sponsors?
So the number that's floating there is the over 300,000 that are unaccounted for at this time.
And they had one person manning the phone.
Allie, how many, or I'm sorry, where did these calls go exactly? To a federal agency, state agencies? Where did it go?
So it was a federal hotline. And the way that my understanding of how a hotline should work, at least at the federal level, is you receive a call and you determine what state, you determine, what the circumstances of the call are, and then you direct it to the appropriate state and local agencies. But when you have 65,000 calls that go unanswered, and then you have a horrifying situation where this current administration, the Trump administration, found that 65,000 calls were unanswered, and they took it initiative. They made it a priority that even though that those calls were old, even though they've been sitting there for a while, they still prioritized it to go through each and every phone call, to follow up on each and every call that was made and that was not answered. And so what I had testified to was that there was a call about a child that had reported that men were coming into his room at night and touching him. And so the Trump administration followed up on that call, and the child was rescued and the sponsor was arrested.
We're speaking with Allie Hopper. Her organization is Guard Against Trafficking, and we're trying to sort of unfold more information about the scandal. And I'll talk about a horrific scandal during the Biden administration of these lost children. And we've noticed a trend here because we've tracked some of the testimony that occurred during the last administration as Republicans tried to hold members of the Biden administration's feet to the fire on this. And there's a trend here. If you get Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, testifying, he'll say, oh, well, that's not really our jurisdiction. We hand these children over and it's HHS to take care of. And then you get Secretary Becerra up there from HHS, and when asked about following up on these children and trying to help them out, he says, oh, that's not our jurisdiction. That's a DA. I mean, they're all pointing the finger at each other. Who is responsible here?
Right.
Exactly. And that was by design. When you point the finger at each other and then you can't figure out who's responsible, then it's hard to get accountability and true oversight for these things. So again, when you have a hotline, that didn't function the way that on paper it's supposed to, and then you sit there and you're trying to determine or maintain a database of sponsor information. So that was the other thing I testified to, was the sponsor information. There was no meaningful process to vet these sponsors, to conduct meaningful background checks on these sponsors. And so they would just take in the information, send these children out to these sponsors. And when you go through a tougher process to adopt a dog from a shelter
Yes.
than it is to sponsor a child, you go through more paperwork. You have to do identity verification, income verification. They sometimes, to adopt a dog, they come to your home to see the situations and circumstances at home. But they did not do any of this to sponsor a child. So my business partner, Dr. Sadowski, and I, we've done a lot of work. We've interviewed incarcerated traffickers. We've been on the border. We've spoken to unaccompanied children. We know this firsthand. This isn't, information that we read somewhere or we watched a video somewhere. This is information that we got on the border from the people themselves. And so when the cartels knew about how this process worked, they exploited it. They knew to hand children sponsor information because they knew there was no meaningful vetting.
Allie, because of Doge, we know how some of this money moved around, and we know that there are several NGOs. I mean, they've just made hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal government, but NGOs also had a role in this. What role exactly did the NGOs, I mean, I'm talking Catholic Charities and several others, play in vetting these people, or did they, again, just sort of not do that? Did they just sort of say, throw their hands up and say, there's not enough sort of resources to do that? What was their role?
So it's interesting. With NGOs, you would have to look at the contracts, what their contractual obligations were for that grant money. That makes it harder because every contract is different. Every scope and requirements are different for every single contract that the government issues. So it makes it really hard for accountability to be had without going through every single contract and every single grant that was issued. But at the end of the day, even as HHS expected the NGOs to vet the sponsors, they don't have the capability. They don't have the ability to go do background checks on these sponsors and do home studies. They don't have that ability. That is a federal and state responsibility to be able to access the databases needed to check on the backgrounds of these sponsors.
Allie Hopper's organization is Guard Against Trafficking, and they're doing the Lord's work there. And Allie, real fast, give us some upside here. Are you confident that the new administration, I know Tom Homan has been very vocal about wanting to find all of these kids and ensure that they're in safe hands. How do you feel that effort is going, and do they need more help?
They absolutely need more help. They need local and state agencies to help the federal initiatives that they have to find these children. And there is an upside. I mean, we are finding these children. As Representative or Congressman Higgins said, 35,000 of those children have been recovered, have been found. And so we are working very hard. This administration is working very hard to undo the horrifying reality that the last administration left. But there is hope, and we just need to continue to support this administration and their efforts.
Thank you, Allie. Allie Hopper, Guard Against Trafficking. Really appreciate it. Sorry, I don't mean to sound so down right now, but this is just, it's so sobering and it's so horrible. And I pray for these children regularly. We all should. It's 8:16.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Lots of you taking your time on your ride in and out of Washington, D.C. these days. D.C. now has a dubious distinction in the United States of America. According to Consumer Reports, the Washington, D.C. metro area, where we like to call home, is now officially the worst traffic city in the country. We've just dethroned Los Angeles. We're back, baby. Congrats. We're number one.
Proud moment, DC. Well done.
It's just to ensure that Jamie Whitten has job security.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I read this and I was like, I thought we already were.
No, there were a few years there, and especially during COVID, where I think because
true.
of the robust work from home policies of not just the federal government, but also many ancillary organizations that interface with the federal government, that had been alleviated. But two things. First of all, we continue to see quite a bit of growth in the area. A lot of people moving here. They want to be here. Listen, you don't get really good morning radio in other cities. And so people want to be here so they can hear this program. And that's understandable. I get that.
They should learn about the app.
They're certainly not moving here because they want to have a winning baseball team or anything. So they move here.
Or low crime.
And we've had quite a well no, I mean that's funny because we do have high crime in D.C. But here's the problem: no one actually wants to live in the city itself. This is the other phenomenon here: is that so many people have moved out of D.C. proper, and they said, "Screw it! I don't want to deal with the city anymore. I don't want to deal with mass transit anymore." The other factor here is that Metro has become such a basket case. People don't want to ride the trains. People don't want to ride the buses. And so they move out of the city and decide they're going to commute in. And one thing leads to another. The 2024 traffic report by Consumer Affairs ranked D.C. number 2, with Los Angeles in the top spot. Los Angeles was also number 1 in 2003. But no, we now, as of the latest publication this week, our congestion each weekday is averaging 6 hours and 35 minutes on average. And the average commute time for your typical Washingtonian, or member of the DMV as the kids like to call it, is now 33 and a half minutes. That's the highest, longest commute in the nation.
I wonder if sort of one of the things that Doge did and what the Trump administration writ large did was insist people come back into the office.
Yes.
Some, half of the week or certain days, but in general, people are going back to that, which, we had various conversations about that. We have a lot of sympathy for people who have to deal with this traffic to get back into the office. So, when that happened, I said, maybe they'll adjust, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they'll everybody come back, and then maybe there'll be some adjustments. Maybe it's time for some adjustments. Maybe people should be working a little bit more. People should be working from home because this is no fun. I feel really bad for people who have to deal with this every morning.
Another factor here is the ongoing road work on George Washington Memorial Parkway.
Larry, I have to deal with that all the time because my kids with their school. Yeah, it's unbelievable. It never ends.
Right. It started April of 23. It continues. Yeah. It's supposed to be done later this year, and that road work is also expanding up to 4 lanes there. All 4 lanes expected to open. So that might, once the work is done and the lanes are reopened, that might alleviate some of this, and that at least that leg of it. But listen, we hear Jamie's reports every single day, and you can predict it at a certain time, usually around 6:30, close to 7. Outer loop of the Beltway. Between Silver Spring and the American Legion Bridge, inner loop of the Beltway from Tyson's Corner to Wisconsin or Connecticut. No, I'm just saying it's like clockwork. It's always those lanes. Yep. It's always that area, and and a big part of it is unlike other cities, other major cities that has a river. See, we have a river. And when you've got a river, like I always said this, I lived in Los Angeles. I dealt with their traffic. It was awful. But we didn't have to worry about water, right? So there are always various alternate routes. If the freeway you're on, we call them freeways in California, was bad, you could quickly do an alternate route and go take another expressway, or you can take side streets or what have you. But when you got a river and you're coming in from Virginia to get to Maryland or D.C. or vice versa, you're limited. You got a couple of bridges. That's all we got. And it's been this way for decades. When was the last time a new bridge was created to cross the Potomac?
I know.
And so as more people move here, it's just going to get worse unless they dig some tunnels or build more bridges. And nobody wants that in their backyard.
Well, before I let you get away with giving L.A. too much praise for not worrying about water, you sure worry about water when there's a fire.
When there's a fire. I just mean driving across a body of water, but you're right. There is an advantage to having your rivers dried up. It's 8:23.
Making sense of your world.
I agree with you 100%.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
There's a lot of us out there.
Making sense of the news.
Coming up, we'll talk to music critic David Wild about the passing of Ozzy Osbourne. Keep it here. It's 8:30.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington. A Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
Ozzy Osbourne's performance on Crazy Train has been called by many experts one of the greatest rock and roll vocals of all time. Ozzy Osbourne passed away yesterday, and there's no doubt he was a legend. He had a cultural impact and an impact on music. The question is, why? What exactly set Ozzy Osbourne apart, other than the theatrics, other than the zaniness, the craziness? And let's look past the character that we saw on the reality show. Let's talk to music critic and contributing editor at Rolling Stone magazine, David Wild. And David, we got to start having conversations other than when somebody dies. This is starting to get, but you're always great at moments like this, so we appreciate you joining us.
It's a thank you. It's an honor to talk about Ozzy, but it is, I have to say, I feel like my lot in life is to be called at moments like this, because we're at that moment in history where that generation that inspired my generation to fall in love with music, Brian Wilson not that long ago, now Ozzy, these are giants, and they're giants that their shoes will never be filled, because I don't think we live in a world where artists can speak to the whole world, and Ozzy is just such a unique figure on so many levels.
Yeah, let's first talk about his artistic contribution. What made Ozzy's music different, and what he did with Black Sabbath? Why was that so influential? Because it seemed like right after Black Sabbath, you had so many other metal bands who all sort of looked like Black Sabbath, sounded like Black Sabbath. That right there sort of tells you how inspiring he was. Yeah,
well, it's rare that a one group can be so central to a genre. And what's interesting is that we've been through, over the last decade or so, even some artists within heavy metal saying, is rock and roll dead? And it's not. But the truth is that Black Sabbath were the defining band that sort of made heavy metal a genre. And even I think even Ozzy maybe didn't love the term being limited that way, because I think a lot of these bands in hard rock think of themselves as just rock and roll, and in a way that's true. But Black Sabbath, to me, just sort of on the exact age where they scared me. Where as a kid, I heard them and I was like, it was the music your parents said turn that off. It was
turn that noise off specifically.
Yes. Oh no, yeah, and that noise has become like a recognized form of art for generation, and that generation is beginning to go away. And it was nice that, Led Zeppelin, who were also very important in a different way, Robert Plant, who I think always hated the association with heavy metal, didn't accept it, spoke beautifully about Ozzy. And that's, to me, the unique thing about Ozzy was, and the success in reality TV, that very unlikely success showed this, was that I think he was central to making Black Sabbath important, because there was always a real musicality. He was famously a Beatles fan, and there's this beautiful footage of him meeting Paul McCartney and expressing his love for the Beatles over the years. And I think he actually brought the sort of warmth to Black Sabbath that were very cold force. It was hot music, but he was sort of, I think he brought the warmth, and I got to know him, writing for him over the years at the Grammys and events. And what I am left with was there was a sweetness to the guy that you thought that they were demonic, but he had a warmth and a sweetness and a sense of humor that I think took him beyond any genre.
It's hard to talk about Ozzy Osbourne without talking about his wife, Sharon. She was part of his reinvention I will tell you, he scared me too. I remember the rumors about bats and their heads being bit off and stuff. He scared me to death. But then, he's then the dad, and kind of a normal dad on a reality show. And his partnership and also, of course, marriage to Sharon was so important to his reinvention and continued popularity with generations. Isn't that true?
Absolutely true. That's very well said, Julian. Like I was because back to the beginning was just like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. I had not thought about this, but when I heard the news, I was looking for a picture I took at the Grammys 2020 when Ozzy and Sharon presented together, and I happened to be sitting talking with them with my wife, who was visiting me backstage, and I have this picture of my wife sitting between the two, kneeling between the two of them, which looks like a family photo. And the truth is, they did become family. And I know, listen, Sharon is famously a tough manager who fought for Ozzy, and I think fought for her clients. And Ozzy was, the Prince of Darkness, supposedly, but they were lovely, and they were always lovely. And I was always writing jokes for him, like I literally one year there was like a gardening accident of some sort where he had almost been killed, and I had to write something for them to give an award, and I literally just gave them the oldest vaudeville joke of all time. And Ozzy walked out and said, "It's good to be here. It's good to be anywhere." And I thought, it's literally like 1920s jokes, and he killed with it.
But it fits. Yes.
It fits him because he really his survivor the fact that he survived and that he went out on a throne in Birmingham with the original Black Sabbath, it couldn't be more perfect. And that's Sharon, because I think Sharon's genius. Sharon had her father was more famously even tough than Sharon was, and somehow her instincts and her love for Ozzy and what he stood for, it played out on the biggest stage in the world. And it's just remarkable that I think his legacy will be incredibly well served by going out in Birmingham with all the biggest stars in the genre he helped make possible, and giving money to charity, which it's like, that's what's amazing is heavy metal in the end, the heart is still pounding. Rock and roll is not dead, and that event helped prove it. And Ozzy will stand in history as, I don't think anyone ever went out with more guts and grace than Ozzy has now.
There was a time in the early mid-'80s where there was a real push from fundamentalist Christians identifying metal music, Black Sabbath in particular, but other groups, as Satanist or dabbling in Satanism. And listen, the hallmarks, the name Black Sabbath, and they had 666 on all their stuff, and obviously they were tipping their hat and exploiting this whole Satanist thing, but they never actually dabbled. Were they cognizant and aware of that? That some of their fans were getting into that dark stuff? Ozzy never did, it appears. In fact, he seemed like, as you said, a kind of a conservative, wholesome dude. But was there any danger of them sort of exploiting or glamorizing those dark things?
I was a kid at the time, and I only met Black Sabbath, in fact, as sort of older men. But I think what you end up feeling is, that was an image thing. And listen, that's central to the history of rock and roll. I mean, it just, in a weird way, was like you could call it an exploitation, but I think it was just a sort of way to get at the dangerous image that rock and roll had at the beginning. But we are now at a point where we can see that rock and roll is, to some people, it's old man's music. It's dad rock. And I don't think what you're left with is anything satanic. I think what you're left with is a lot of heart and a lot of guys who love a type of music and who stood for it. And it's actually what I'm left with is a sense of I don't know. I doubt any of them were seriously. They were working too hard as a band to be demonic. They were,
too busy working to get into that.
Right, and they were probably doing too many drugs in some cases and getting drunk too much. But I don't know. The evil side of it, I think, was a very, very useful marketing tool for young men primarily. Yeah. But in the end, I think I'm left with the sweetness, and I can only tell you that he was lovely. He was, I literally think, how lucky am I to have this guy who scared me as a kid ended up writing jokes for him on, award shows, and never. I mean, he had a sweet smile. I think that reality show.
He seemed like a little. He seemed like a teddy bear, and it is fascinating compared to the onstage persona. Well, listen, thanks for sharing your memories with us as always, David. Really appreciate the conversation.
Oh no, listen, I'm honored to speak about him, and good to talk to you under always sad conditions.
Yeah, we got to get you back before someone else dies.
Yes.
I make dark humor because Ozzy would have appreciated dark humor himself. By the way, David's podcast is Naked Lunch. Check that out as well.
WMAL FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9.